The road stretched ahead like a ghost of what it once was, cracked asphalt, abandoned vehicles, and signs half covered in ivy and dust. The sun hovered low in the sky, casting long shadows over what remained of the town of Millstone. Somewhere beneath that silence, something moved. Jonah Reese gripped his rusted flashlight tighter, the dull clink of his utility belt the only sound that accompanied his slow steps through the collapsed gas station. He paused, listening, not for the groans of the undead, but for something rarer, human voices. It had been weeks since he last heard one. Dead America was exactly what people now called it. After the outbreak swept through the major cities, the power grid failed, the military fell, and communication lines went dead. Rumors of safe zones vanished with the wind. Now, Jonah wandered from town to town, guided only by an old CB radio and a journal filled with coordinates scribbled by fading hands. And then, 3 nights ago, a miracle. A voice crackled through his radio, a faint, garbled signal, calling for help. The words had been hard to make out, but one phrase repeated clearly before cutting out. "We're alive, please. Millstone, help us." Millstone had once been a quiet mining town, nestled against forested hills and forgotten highways. Now, it was a graveyard, though not an empty one. Jonah crouched beside an overturned vending machine, sweeping his flashlight across the station's back room. Old snack wrappers and blood-stained walls greeted him. No bodies. That was worse. Bodies meant closure. But silence, and blood with no source, that meant they might still be nearby. Or something else was. A metallic creak echoed from the second floor above. Jonah froze. He raised his walkie. "If you can hear me, this is Jonah Reese. I'm near the gas station on Route 9. I got your signal. If you're out there, respond." Nothing but static. He climbed the narrow staircase, every wooden step threatening to betray him with a loud creak. At the top, he nudged the door open, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. A cot. A radio. A mess of wires. Someone had definitely been here. Suddenly, the radio sparked to life, crackling, humming. Jonah jerked back. A voice, distorted but urgent, broke through. "They're not gone. They're under Millstone." Then silence. Jonah stepped forward and turned off the radio manually. The hum of the static cut out. His instincts kicked in. He wasn't alone anymore. Not in this building, and not in this town. Something was watching. He descended the stairs quickly and returned to the front of the station, where a battered map of Millstone still hung on the wall. The coal mines. The sewer tunnels. Places under Millstone. Had the survivors retreated underground? Or had something else found its way there? As he scanned the map, the walkie hissed again. A child's voice this time. Weak, afraid. "Please, don't leave, they come when it's dark." Jonah's heart hammered. This wasn't just a search and rescue anymore, it was a race against time. He slung his backpack over his shoulder and stepped outside. The air had grown colder. Distant crows cawed above, circling lazily in the dusky sky. From the woods behind the station, something growled, a low, unnatural sound. Then a second. And a third. Jonah didn't wait. He sprinted toward the town center, following the faded signs toward Millstone Emergency Shelter, hoping it hadn't become another trap. Shadows darted between buildings. Not just the infected, something else. Faster. Smarter. As he reached the town square, he found the library partially barricaded. Books scattered everywhere. Candles burned inside. Someone had been here, recently. On the front doors, scratched into the wood with a knife. "Stay quiet. They listen." Jonah hesitated, hand on the door. Behind him, something hissed. He pushed inside, locking the door behind him, and waited in the dark, breath held, listening. Footsteps shuffled outside. Then a voice, not the radio this time. A real voice, close, and whispering. "He's here. He heard us. Get the others." Jonah stepped backward slowly, bumping into a stack of books that toppled over with a loud thud. Too loud. Whatever was outside had heard it too. To be continued in part 2, The Silent Ones Beneath. The noise had been a mistake. Jonah crouched in the dark library, hidden between 2 toppled shelves, his breath shallow. Outside, something dragged its feet across the stone path. Slow, deliberate. Not the wild charge of the infected. This was, measured. A presence that waited, listened, and knew how to hunt. Minutes passed. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Jonah waited another full minute before creeping toward the back of the library. There, behind a cabinet, he found what he'd hoped for, a metal hatch set into the floor, padlocked. It was marked with the faded letters, "Emergency Tunnel Access." He slid a crowbar from his backpack and wedged it beneath the rusty lock. A few tense grunts and a sharp crack later, the hatch creaked open. Stale air poured upward. He climbed down into the darkness, closing the hatch softly above him. His flashlight clicked on, revealing a narrow concrete tunnel stretching into blackness. Cracked pipes ran along the ceiling. Old emergency signs pointed in the direction of the Millstone Shelter, an old mining site converted into a fallout refuge years before the outbreak. He followed the tunnel slowly. The air was thick with mold and something worse, rot. Walls dripped moisture. Rats scurried across the path ahead. But Jonah kept going. He had to. That child's voice still echoed in his mind. "Please, don't leave." After nearly 10 minutes, he heard something new, muffled voices. Real ones. Human. Not far now. Then came a metallic bang behind him. He froze. His flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then darkness swallowed him whole. Panic crawled up his spine. He slapped the flashlight until it steadied and turned back, shining it behind him. Nothing. He turned to continue forward, and saw her. A girl, no older than 11, standing in the tunnel ahead, barefoot and shaking. Her clothes were torn and stained with soot. Jonah lowered his voice. "Hey. I heard you on the radio. You okay?" The girl didn't respond. She simply raised her hand, and pointed down a smaller side tunnel to her left. Then, without a word, she ran. "Wait." Jonah hesitated only a second before following. The side tunnel narrowed quickly. Pipes hung lower, and the ceiling dripped steadily. The flashlight illuminated scattered supplies, flashlights, bags, and torn clothes. Signs of life. Signs of survival. But then the air shifted. The tunnel opened into a wide maintenance chamber. At the far end was a heavy steel door, half open. Light flickered from within. Jonah entered slowly. His boots crunched glass. On the wall beside him, scrawled in red marker. "If you hear them whispering, it's already too late." He stepped into the chamber fully, and found it empty. Just a single bed, a radio, and blood pooled near the far wall. No girl. No sound. Then the radio came to life. "You followed her." Jonah turned toward the sound. The voice was calm. Male. Slightly distorted. "They know now. They heard your light." A chill ran down Jonah's back. "Who are you?" Silence. Then the same voice, quieter. "You've led them to us." Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and went out. Jonah spun around. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel behind him. Multiple. Soft. Fast. He raised his flashlight and aimed it at the door. For just a split second, the beam caught movement, figures crawling along the walls, pale and lean, their eyes reflecting light like animals. Jonah didn't hesitate. He slammed the door shut and bolted it from the inside. Breathing heavily, he turned back toward the radio. Another voice crackled in. A woman this time. Whispering. Urgent. We're deeper. 3rd level. Find us. Don't trust what you hear in the dark. And then, gunshots. Faint, far off. Followed by screams. Jonah grabbed the map off the wall, an old schematic of the underground mine system. The 3rd level was at least 2 tunnels down and another floor beneath. If those people were real, they needed help now. But the question lingered. Who was that girl? And what were those things? The infected he knew were fast, mindless, loud. But what he saw in that tunnel, those weren't infected. They were waiting. Watching. And they had learned to move in silence. Jonah tightened the strap on his backpack, switched out his dying flashlight battery, and marked the 3rd level access path on the map. Then, with one last glance at the locked door behind him, he stepped deeper into the dark. To be continued in Part 3, 3rd level, Nowhere is Safe. The descent to the 3rd level was suffocating. Jonah moved through the narrow, rust-covered maintenance shaft, the only light coming from his flashlight and the faint red glow of old emergency lamps clinging to life. The deeper he went, the more the air thickened, musty, damp, and tinged with the coppery scent of dried blood. Each step echoed louder than the last. He checked the map he'd found earlier. A stairwell should be up ahead on his left, leading directly to the 3rd level central corridor, a place once used as an evacuation shelter, now forgotten and possibly crawling with whatever was down here. Jonah gripped the flashlight tighter, trying to block out the whispers. They weren't loud. Just at the edge of hearing. A low, constant murmur in the distance, like dozens of people speaking softly behind walls that didn't exist. We're deeper. Find us. The woman's voice from the radio looped in his head. But her signal had gone silent since. He hadn't heard from her, or the child, since slamming the steel door upstairs. As he reached the stairwell, he paused. Something wasn't right. A large message had been scrawled in black ash across the wall. They mimic. Don't answer unless you see the face. Jonah blinked at it, heart pounding. Mimic? Did that mean the voices he heard weren't human? He pressed on. The 3rd level opened into a wide concrete hallway. The air was colder here, and the silence had weight. This area had once been a safe zone. You could still see remnants of it, makeshift bunks, medical kits, drawings taped to the walls. Hope had lived here once. But not anymore. Jonah turned the corner and froze. A body. It lay crumpled near the wall, a flare still clutched in its dead hand. The face was torn, but not like an infected attack. No, this was surgical. Deliberate. The body hadn't just been killed, it had been studied. Jonah knelt down, inspecting it. Dog tags. K. Harmon, Med Corps. One of the survivors? A soldier? Before he could investigate further, a soft voice came from the hallway behind him. Jonah? He stood up instantly, flashlight jerking toward the sound. The girl again. She stood at the far end, barefoot, just like before. Her eyes wide and terrified. Jonah, you have to help them, she whispered. How do you know my name? He asked, taking a cautious step forward. She didn't answer. She only turned and walked into the shadows again, vanishing behind a wall of debris. Jonah followed, slowly. At the end of the hallway, he found a partially collapsed room. Supplies were scattered. Crates overturned. But then, faintly, he heard it again. Crying. Not far away. He moved a broken shelf aside and discovered a steel grate set into the floor. Below it, a ladder led into a sub-chamber, a narrow utility room built deeper into the mine. From below, a light flickered. Jonah climbed down. And there they were. A group of 6 survivors, 3 adults, 2 teenagers, and 1 elderly man. They stared at him with sunken, frightened eyes as he emerged from the hatch. Their makeshift hideout was cramped and damp, but they had sealed it off well. A woman, mid-30s, armed with a crowbar, stepped forward. "You're not one of them," she said carefully. "No," Jonah said, lowering his gear. "I picked up your radio signal." "That wasn't us," she said. "We've been quiet for 2 days. We destroyed our transmitter." Jonah's blood ran cold. "What?" She nodded. "Someone, or something, has been broadcasting our voices." Jonah sat heavily on a crate, realization crashing over him. The child. The whispering on the radio. It had all been a lure. A trap. Someone, or something, wanted him down here. "We think they listen," the woman continued. "Not just sounds. Thoughts. Memories. That's how they speak so perfectly. That's how they trick people into following them." Jonah's hand trembled. "Have you seen them?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "They're not undead. Not anymore. They were. But now, they're changing. Growing. Learning." A crash above them made everyone flinch. One of the teens whispered, "They're above us now." The elderly man reached into a box and pulled out a worn tape recorder. He handed it to Jonah. This belonged to a doctor who was studying them. He died last week. But his notes, if they're real, say the infection is evolving. Jonah took the recorder. Clicked play. A rasping voice filled the chamber. "They shed the body, become thought, voices without flesh." Then a scream. Static. Silence. The woman looked at Jonah. "You shouldn't have come here. Now they know you. And they'll follow you out." Jonah stared at the ladder, the tape recorder still running in his hand. Above them, the whispers grew louder. To be continued in Part 4, "They know you now." The whispers were no longer distant. They pressed in from the stairwells, from the tunnels above, from the cracks in the stone. Jonah could feel them, like invisible fingers brushing against the back of his neck, curling around the edges of his thoughts. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was presence. And it knew his name. The survivors had barricaded the sub-chamber as best they could. Old metal crates. Rebar. Wooden beams. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might buy them an hour. Maybe less. "We can't stay here," the woman said. Her name was Amy, leader of the group by necessity, not choice. "They've found us before. But never this quickly." Jonah held the tape recorder in his hand, rewinding it again and again. The doctor's words echoed with more clarity now. "They shed the body, become thought." He turned to the elderly man, Owen, who had given him the recorder. What did he mean by that? How does something without a body hunt? Owen gave him a grim smile. "They were infected once. Just like the others. But something changed. They didn't die like the rest. Their minds split. They don't live in their bodies anymore. The body is just a mask now." A teenager in the corner, Ravi, gripped his bat tighter. "I don't care what they are. If they come through that door, I'll swing till I drop." Amy looked toward Jonah. "You've seen more than most who come down here. Tell me, was there a little girl?" Jonah froze. "Yes. She's not real," Amy said. "At least, not anymore. She was one of ours. Lost during a run. The whispers, whatever they are, they've been using her image. They show her to anyone who listens to the voices. She's their lure. Jonah clenched his fists. He'd followed her twice now. Had trusted her face, her voice. And it had all been a trick. Suddenly, a thud echoed above. Then another. Amy motioned everyone to silence. The whispers stopped. The silence was worse. Then, metal shrieked. The upper hatch groaned as it was forced open. Jonah stepped toward the ladder, weapon drawn. A figure dropped into view. But it wasn't lunging. It wasn't rushing. It stood there, head tilted, watching. A man, at least, what had once been one. His eyes were gone. Sockets blackened. But his mouth curled into an eerie smile. Then he spoke. In Jonah's own voice. You shouldn't have come. Amy grabbed Jonah and pulled him back as Ravi swung his bat. The figure twisted unnaturally, dodging the blow without effort. Another survivor, Luis, rushed forward and stabbed it in the side with a makeshift spear. It didn't scream. Didn't even blink. It just whispered. We remember your thoughts. Your fear tastes like fire. Luis tried to pull back, but the creature grabbed his face with a hand far too large, far too long, and lifted him off the ground. Jonah didn't think, he fired. The bullet hit its shoulder, and the creature finally screamed. A sound like static exploding. It dropped Luis and staggered back into the ladder shaft. The chamber erupted into motion. Go! Amy shouted. They surged up the opposite exit tunnel, Jonah leading the way with Ravi. Amy dragged Luis, who was barely conscious. The whispers turned to shrieks behind them, echoing through the corridors like a storm of teeth and voices. Jonah slammed a door behind them and sealed it with a locking bar. They were in another access tunnel now, darker, colder, and even deeper underground. Ravi gasped, "Where do we go now?" Amy wiped blood from her brow. "There's another exit, a mine elevator shaft. It hasn't worked in years, but the ladder inside might get us to the surface." Jonah looked down the new tunnel. "Then we move. Now." But Owen was still standing by the door, staring at the darkness they'd fled. "They're changing faster," he said. "Adapting. Mimicking voices, now faces. If they can be us, then how do we know?" He didn't finish. From behind them, Luis stirred weakly. His eyes fluttered open. But his voice was wrong. "Jonah," he said in the child's voice. "Don't leave me again." Everyone froze. Jonah slowly turned toward him. Luis was smiling. To be continued in Part 5, The One Wearing Luis. Amy stumbled backward, her grip tightening on the crowbar. Jonah stared at Luis, no, the thing that looked like Luis, as it sat slumped against the tunnel wall. His eyes blinked sluggishly, but the smile remained, and the voice that came out of his mouth was unmistakably wrong. "Jonah, it's cold." "I'm scared," the little girl's voice again. Perfectly mimicked. Jonah raised his weapon slowly. "You're not Luis." The thing tilted its head. "He's still in here, somewhere. His memories are warm. He thought of you when he was dying." Amy stepped forward. "We can't take it with us. You know that." But Ravi hesitated. What if it is Luis? What if they're just copying his voice?" Jonah shook his head. "It's not. Look at the eyes." They all did. Luis's eyes were moving, but not together. One twitched aimlessly while the other focused too sharply, too steadily, on Jonah. Like it was studying him. Then Luis's mouth opened again, and this time, his own voice came out, ragged and pleading. "Kill me before it comes back." Without hesitation, Amy moved forward and drove the crowbar straight into his temple. The body collapsed. Still. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Owen muttered, "It's inside them now. Like a parasite. Using them like puppets. If one of us gets taken." Jonah nodded grimly. "We can't hesitate next time." Amy checked the hallway. "Come on. We're almost at the elevator shaft." They moved quickly, the weight of what just happened thick in the air. They no longer walked in tight formation, everyone kept a bit of distance, as if suddenly unsure if the person beside them was real. The access corridor narrowed, sloping upward until it opened into a wide service chamber. At the far end stood the elevator shaft, its metal cage long rusted, the lift platform itself jammed halfway between levels. A rickety ladder bolted to the side stretched into darkness above. "Looks stable enough," Jonah said, eyeing the bolts. "One at a time, slow and quiet." Amy looked back. "I'll go last." Jonah climbed first. The iron was cold and slick with condensation. Every few feet, he paused and listened. But the voices were gone now. Silent. Too silent. Ravi followed next. Then Owen. Then the teenage girl, Mia, who hadn't spoken since Louis's death. Amy was halfway up when they heard it. A thud. Then another. From the tunnel below, something was coming. Something heavy, fast, and unnatural. Jonah shouted, "Climb! Climb now!" Suddenly, a screeching echo filled the shaft, like metal twisting and teeth grinding on stone. Then a hand shot out from the tunnel below. Pale, veined, too long to be human. It grabbed the bottom rung of the ladder and began climbing, fast. Amy was only a few rungs above it. The creature didn't look up. It didn't need to. It climbed like it had done this 100 times. Fluid. Inhuman. Amy screamed. Jonah grabbed a loose pipe near the top of the shaft and braced himself. "Keep going." As the creature reached for Amy's foot, Jonah swung the pipe down with all his strength. Crack. The pipe connected with the thing's skull. It let out a burst of static, no scream, no pain, just noise, and slipped. Amy kicked its hand off the rung, and it tumbled backward into the black. A sickening crunch echoed from below. But Jonah wasn't convinced it was dead. They reached the top of the shaft and burst into what looked like a storage depot, one of the uppermost levels of the mine, closer to the surface. Old mining tools, broken crates, and a torn tarp covered in dust. Jonah slammed the access door shut behind them and welded it with a nearby chain. Breathing hard, they all collapsed to the floor. I thought it had me," Amy said, trembling. Ravi wiped sweat from his face. "We need to get out of this place. I don't care if there's snow or fire waiting outside. I'm done with this tomb." Jonah looked at Owen, who was examining a cracked monitor screen connected to the facility's old surveillance system. "There's something else," Owen said quietly. Everyone turned. He tapped the monitor. On it, a grainy black and white feed showed the elevator shaft they'd just escaped. The creature was standing again. Looking straight into the camera. Then it smiled. And spoke Jonah's voice into the mic. "I'm still coming. To be continued in Part 6, the surface isn't safe either." The wind howled through the broken slats of the storage depot's roof, cold and sharp, but it wasn't the cold that made Jonah shiver. It was the silence. After the encounter in the shaft, after the creature's taunting voice through the camera, everyone had expected more noise. The clatter of pursuit. The whispers. The shrieks. But there was nothing. Just that cold, dry wind brushing against their skin like a warning. Amy pushed open the side door slowly, her flashlight beam stretching into the snowy dusk beyond. They had made it to the surface. But it didn't look like salvation. The world above was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful, it felt empty. They were in a remote part of what had once been Colorado's mining districts, but the forest that should have surrounded the depot had thinned unnaturally. Trees stood blackened, stripped of bark and leaves. Power lines dangled like veins from rusted poles. Ravi stepped out next. "Why's it so quiet? No birds. No wind in the trees. Nothing." "Because they've been here," Owen said softly, not looking up. "Whatever they were underground, they've been feeding. Evolving. The silence means they've listened to everything." Amy motioned for them to move. "We're not staying. There's an outpost 20 miles northeast, an old emergency radio tower. If it's still powered, we might be able to send a signal." Jonah nodded. "Then we don't waste time." They moved quickly, sticking to cover, trees, crumbled cars, shattered signs. The snow was only an inch deep, but their footsteps sounded too loud against it. Mia lagged behind a bit, always glancing over her shoulder. She hadn't said a word since the incident with Luis, but now, as they passed an overturned van on the side of the road, she stopped. "I hear something," she whispered. Everyone froze. It wasn't the whispers. It was worse. It was humming. A soft, childish melody, drifting through the trees. A lullaby. Jonah's heart dropped. "Don't listen to it." But Mia was already walking toward the sound. Ravi tried to stop her. "Hey! Mia, don't." Too late. A form stepped out from behind a crumbled billboard, small, barefoot, in a tattered yellow dress. The same girl Jonah had seen in the tunnels. She smiled. "I'm cold, Jonah. Can we go home now?" Mia gasped. "That's my sister." "No, it's not," Amy said, grabbing Mia's wrist. "It's wearing her face. Back away." But Mia trembled, tears running down her face. "She died before this started. That can't be her." Jonah raised his weapon, but the girl didn't move. She just stood there, her head slowly tilting, lips twitching. Then she opened her mouth and every voice Jonah had ever heard screamed at once. The sound shattered the moment. Mia collapsed, clutching her ears. The rest dropped to the ground, stunned. When Jonah looked up again, the girl was gone. But the silence hadn't returned. The humming was everywhere now, like it had bled into the sky. Jonah lifted Mia to her feet. "You okay?" She nodded weakly, not speaking. Ravi wiped blood from his nose. That thing almost split my skull from the inside." "They're no longer just underground," Owen whispered. "They're reaching into us, into our minds. Every voice, every image, it's all just a door for them to crawl through." Jonah pointed toward the hills. "Then let's close that door. The tower's that way. If they can speak through our memories, we need to scream back louder, with a signal they can't control." They pressed forward. By nightfall, they reached the base of a snow-covered ridge. The radio tower loomed at the top, still standing, its red warning light blinking weakly in the fog. Finally, Amy said, catching her breath. "We make it up there, we call for help." Ravi grinned. "And then what? A chopper shows up? Soldiers storming in with flamethrowers and..." The wind cut him off. "No, not wind. Footsteps. Slow, wet, dragging footsteps. From both sides of the ridge. Figures emerged from the dark. Dozens of them. Moving in perfect silence, but their mouths opened as if screaming. No sound came out. Their eyes were gone, just smooth, pale skin where faces should be. Owen gasped, "They're not whispering anymore, they're listening now." Jonah grabbed Mia's hand. "Run." They sprinted up the hill, snow spraying behind them. The creatures followed, not fast, not urgent, just constant. Like death had no need to rush. As they neared the base of the tower, Jonah reached for the control panel. Locked. The keypad blinked red. Amy shouted, "Override code." "Anyone?" Owen pushed past them and typed a sequence from memory. The panel turned green. They slammed the door behind them. Locked it. Safe, for now. Inside the tower, the equipment hummed weakly. A single mic stood beside the dusty transmitter board. Jonah stared at it. Then let's scream. To be continued in Part 7, a signal in the static. Inside the tower, a dim amber light pulsed with each beep from the old transmission board. Dust floated in the stale air, thick with tension and the smell of ancient machinery sparking back to life. Jonah stared at the microphone like it might bite. It had been years since he'd seen a working one outside a military base, if this even was still working. Amy scanned the controls, flipping switches and turning knobs until the static leveled into a low hum. Old analog setup, she muttered. But if the power grid's still feeding it, we've got a chance. If anyone's still out there. Ravi moved to the narrow window slit and peered down the hill. They haven't moved. Just standing there. Like statues. Creepy, silent statues. They're listening, Owen murmured, his voice barely audible. They're always listening now. Mia sat on the floor, her head against the metal wall, rocking slightly. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. It wasn't clear if she was praying, or slipping. Jonah finally reached for the mic. His hand hovered above it for a second longer before he pressed the button. "This is Jonah Ramirez," he began, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "We're broadcasting from Tower 6 outside the East Ridge mining compound. Survivors present, 5. Requesting immediate assistance. If you're hearing this, respond. Repeat, this is." A wave of static swallowed his voice. The room flickered as the lights dimmed, then flared again. "What the hell?" Amy said, tapping the console. "That wasn't me." The speakers buzzed. Then a voice, not Jonah's, came through the system. "You shouldn't have come here." Everyone froze. Ravi stepped back from the window. Who was that?" Jonah leaned into the mic again. "Identify yourself. We're trying to reach command." "Is this a secure line?" Static. Then laughter. Childlike. Familiar. Owen backed into a corner, his face pale. "That's not someone on the other end. That's them." The speaker crackled again. "The voice you use is not your own. The words you speak are borrowed." The temperature in the room dropped. Frost crept along the edge of the metal walls from inside. Mia suddenly stood. Still rocking slightly. "Make it stop," she whispered. "They're inside again. I didn't let them in. I didn't." Jonah crossed to her, gently holding her shoulders. "Look at me. You're safe. You're in control. We are in control." "No," she said. "They're already in the wires." The lights blinked again, and the console emitted a mechanical squeal that made everyone cover their ears. The monitor, dead until now, flickered on. A grainy feed appeared. A hallway. Stone walls. Rusted doors. The mine shaft. Then it changed. Faces appeared. Familiar ones. Luis. Dana. People who didn't survive. "Is that a recording?" Ravi asked. "No," Jonah's voice cracked. "That's now." More footage flickered across the screen. A view from the treetops. Their group walking toward the tower. Amy gasped. "They've been watching through our eyes." Owen nodded slowly. "They don't just imitate voices. They absorb memories. Once they've heard you, they become you." Jonah turned back to the mic. Who are you? What do you want? The reply came instantly. To be remembered. A sudden loud bang slammed against the tower door. Everyone jumped. Ravi grabbed a nearby pipe and rushed to brace it. They're moving now. Another slam. The metal creaked. Jonah looked at the monitor again. The camera in the trees showed more figures approaching, hundreds. Slowly, steadily. In complete silence. Owen was at the console, typing frantically. I can boost the signal. Use emergency repeater towers. We can send this to every known listening post left on the continent. Amy helped him connect the wires. If we're going to die, the world's going to know what did this. Jonah spoke into the mic again. This is Tower 6. Repeat, we have visual confirmation of a new type of entity, mimics of the undead, capable of communication, psychological manipulation, and group coordination. If you receive this, do not approach infected zones. Do not respond to familiar voices. Another slam rocked the tower. The door dented inward. Then a single voice came through the mic again. Quiet. Calm. Jonah's own voice. We're already inside. The equipment sparked and hissed. Smoke filled the room. The monitor shattered. Jonah backed away, coughing. Owen, cut the power. Kill the feed. Owen yanked the breaker. Darkness. Outside, the pounding stopped. No sound. No movement. Silence returned. Ravi whispered, did we stop it? But Jonah wasn't so sure. He walked to the window and looked down. The hill was empty. They were gone. Every one of them. No tracks. No figures. Just untouched snow under the moonlight. They were never really outside, Mia said, now eerily calm. They were waiting, for the message to be sent. Jonah looked at her. What do you mean? She turned to face him, and for a moment, just a flash, her eyes weren't her own. To be continued in Part 8, the final voice. The power never came back on. Only the emergency red light glowed dimly in the corner of the tower room, casting long shadows across their anxious faces. Everyone stood in silence, trying not to look at Mia, whose sudden stillness had unnerved them all. Jonah kept one hand on his weapon, the other clenched tightly by his side. We need to leave, he said. Now. No, Owen said, quietly. We need to know what we've done. Amy wiped dust from the smashed monitor. That signal, if it really reached the outer posts, we might have just exposed them to it. The thing pretending to be us. Ravi stepped forward. We tried to warn them. But maybe that was the plan all along, Jonah muttered. To make us send it out. Mia finally moved. She looked normal. Tired. Pale. But no longer distant. They're not chasing us anymore, she said. Because they don't need to. We've done what they wanted. The voice is everywhere now. Owen leaned against the console. We transmitted the infection. Not through blood. Through sound. Jonah's eyes widened. It's a mental virus. Exactly, Owen nodded. Once you hear it, it gets in. Like a melody you can't forget. A thought you didn't mean to think. The mimic uses your memories, your regrets, to infect others. It's not just a horde, it's a network. Jonah paced. Then we can't go back to the colony. If we do, we'll bring it with us. You don't have to, came a voice behind him. Jonah spun around, Mia was smiling faintly. It's already there. A cold silence fell over the room. What did you just say? Jonah asked carefully. I heard it when we were underground, Mia said, almost peacefully. At first, it was just Dana's voice. Then my brother's. Then, mine. It didn't hurt. It just made me understand. There's no survival anymore. Just, evolution. Ravi raised his weapon. Back away, Mia. Slowly. Mia didn't move. You think you're holding a weapon. But everything you know, all your training, your plans, it's useless now. This isn't a fight for survival. It's a shift in control. Jonah's voice trembled. Then why are you still talking? Why not just attack? Because I want you to remember, Mia said. Remember what it felt like to be human. To hope. To believe someone was out there, listening. You're the last echoes in a dying world. The final voice. Then she stepped forward. Ravi fired. The shot echoed in the tower, deafening. Mia fell. Hard. No scream. No reaction. They stood over her, hearts pounding. But her lips were still moving. Not words. A whisper. A hum. The same tune they'd heard in the mines. In the static. That eerie, familiar lullaby. Suddenly, the emergency radio flared to life again. No one touched it. A voice played on loop. This is Tower 6. Survivors present, 5. Requesting immediate assistance. It was Jonah's voice again. But they were right there. He lunged toward the board to shut it down, but the system had no power. The wires were disconnected. The repeater line was still dead. Impossible, he muttered. Owen backed away from the console. It's not a recording. Amy whispered, then what is it? Jonah looked at the shattered screen, where static had begun to flicker once again. They've learned to copy us, without even touching us. Outside, the sky was no longer dark. A strange orange hue seeped through the window. A false dawn. Ravi opened the door slowly, gun raised. What he saw made him freeze. The woods were full. Hundreds of silent figures stood in the snow, staring up at the tower. Motionless. Not groaning. Not attacking. Just watching. And each of them was someone they had known. Faces from the base. The convoy. The city. As if every lost voice had taken shape. They're not hunting us anymore, Owen said. They're waiting, Amy added, trembling. For what? Jonah asked. Then Mia's voice answered from the floor, though her mouth was no longer moving. To speak again. They all turned to the radio. More voices emerged now. All at once. A chorus. One by one, their names were spoken. Jonah. Amy. Owen. Ravi. Each followed by the same sentence. We remember you. Jonah closed his eyes, his mind racing. There's no way out of this, he said. Not for us. But maybe, Owen whispered, we can still stop it from spreading. Jonah looked at him, then at the console, then at the small EMP device Ravi had carried since the start, last resort. Jonah nodded. Broadcast death. They placed the device on the board. Ravi armed it. The countdown began, 10 seconds. Think anyone will hear it? Amy asked. Maybe, Jonah said. But more importantly, maybe they won't. The tower filled with the growing hum of the mimic voices. They stood together, calm, defiant, until the flash of white swallowed everything. Silence. Somewhere far away, on another relay tower, a radio crackled to life. A voice played. This is Tower 6. Survivors present, 5. Requesting immediate assistance. But this time, no one responded. No one remained to listen. And dead America stayed quiet. For now. Let me know if you'd like alternate endings, character art prompts, or to begin your next zombie story.